is fostering green recovery through climate technologies. Today we are already in the fourth week and well, unfortunately it's the last week of our webinar series. We will discuss today the upscaling of technology cooperation. My name is Nancy and together with my colleague Julia, I'm hosting today's session. A few comments about our webinar series for those of you who are joining us for the first time. The webinar series consists of 4 sessions in total, and as we're having the last session today, I'm happy to invite you to look up the recorded sessions and presentations of our previous webinars on our webpage. We've invited international experts to share their perspective on technology transfer and to address the question on how the private sector and market mechanism can accelerate technology transfer and technology cooperation. The webinar series is organized by NDE Germany, which is one of the 158 focal points to promote the transfer of climate-related technologies. The NDEs have been created under the framework of the technology mechanism of UNFCCC, and NDE Germany is hosted by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, on whose behalf the webinars are being organized. While in our first session, our speakers discussed technology standards in high-emitting industries, and in the second, we focused on financing climate technologies. Last week, our panelists from CTCN, the Africa Business Network, Energy Solutions Made in Germany, and Africa Green Tech were discussing how to successfully implement climate technologies by elaborating the necessary framework and explaining an expiring case study. Besides looking into the business and network opportunities, as well as the consultancy services, we also learned how much a mobile solar plant can change the whole community by providing not only electricity, but also helping to engage them in establishing and growing their local businesses. It further contributes to other sustainable development goals by reducing food waste, providing internet access, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Before we get started today, and as always, maybe some quick remarks on how you as a listener can interact during this webinar. Our speakers will first provide short inputs. Afterwards, we will have a panel discussion for which we would like you to participate by raising questions. So please don't be shy and ask all the questions you feel like asking. Then we will close the session today and the webinar series with some closing remarks from the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. You as listeners, you are all muted. However, you can type your questions in the Q&A box, which you can see on the bottom of your screen. The chat function is not disabled. However, we strongly encourage you to use the Q&A box, as not all the questions and answers in the chat function can be shared with everyone. So please use the Q&A box. You can either ask questions about one presentation in particular or to the whole panel for the panel discussions at the end of the session. It would be very helpful though if you could indicate whether your question is for a certain speaker or just in general a question for all the panelists. As I said, Julia will co-host the session and she will make sure that all the questions are being integrated in this webinar. So Julia, maybe you want to quickly say hi.
Hello, everybody.
Great. Then I would say, let's get started. As mentioned before, we are looking today into the upscaling of technology cooperation and the importance of sectoral transformation. We chose the example of the transport sector as it's one of the high emitting sectors. I would like to very welcome our first 2 speakers, Orly Jacob and Tomoo Machiba from CTCN. Orly Jacob is the chair of the advisory board at CTCN and works as a senior policy advisor in the International Energy Branch at Natural Resources Canada, and is also the Canadian technology negotiator under the UNFCCC. Tomoo Machiba serves as a deputy director at CTCN since January 2019, hired by its co-hosting agency UNIDO, and mainly works on network engagement, capacity building, monitoring and evaluation, and post-implementation of technical assistance projects. Today's presentation focuses on CTCN's role on technology transfer, as well as opportunities and challenges for scaling it up. I would say the floor is yours, Orly and Tomoo, so please go ahead.
Sorry about that. Just unmuting myself. Hello, everyone. I am very pleased to be here today on behalf of the advisory board to the Climate Technology Center and Network. The CTCN was established in 2013 as the operational arm of the UNFCCC technology mechanism, and it's hosted by the United Nations Environment Programme and the UN Industrial Development Organization, with the support of 11 consortium partner institutions. The CTCN Advisory Board, or the CTCN, was established by parties to the UNFCCC under the negotiations process. And it is through this advisory board that parties support the CTCN's work in delivering the mandate that we set out for it. We meet twice per year to approve the CTCN's budget, operating plans, as well as providing guidance on strategic elements of its operations. The CTCN was created alongside the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC to work together to provide support to developing countries. The CTCN's role is to help developing countries realize their commitments under the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals by providing technology solutions and the related capacity building. The CTCN consists of two parts: a center, a coordinating entity located in UN City in Copenhagen, Denmark, and it also has satellite offices in Nairobi, Kenya, Panama, Vienna, and Paris, with offices soon to be established in Mexico City, Bangkok, and Songdo, Republic of Korea. The CTCN also has a vast worldwide network of organizations, currently numbering over 500 members, that deliver the CTCN services with their respective expertise, and they include civil society, finance, private sector, and research institutions. And now I would turn it over to my colleague Tomoo to walk you through more details of the CTCN operations.
Thank you, Orly. And hello, everyone. My name is Tomoo Machiba. I'm the Deputy Director of CTCN based in Copenhagen. Please change the slides, please. And briefly explaining about CTCN, and even though last week and our director Rose Muebeza, and she introduced about CTCN briefly. And CTCN is kind of under COP mandate, and you might be familiar with the financial mechanisms such as Green Climate Fund, but CTCN provides technology support together with Technology Executive Committee. But also CTCN is called a center and network, which is unique, and center itself is based in headquarters in Copenhagen. It's quite small, hosted by UNEP and UNIDO, but we have nearly 600 network members, and which actually implement technical assistance for the countries. But also our network, including 161 country focal points called National Designated Entity, NDE. Next, please. And this is explaining how our technical assistance work. And first, we have to get requests from the countries, and we are kind of demand-based organizations. So interest party can contact their own national focal point called NDE, and to request any climate technology assistance, mitigation, and adaptation. Once received this request, NDE confirms alignment of the request with the national priorities and strategy. Then if they accept, then pass it to the CTCN. The CTCN also having a screening process. Then we make a project plan called a response plan. Then we go into the UN bidding process normally, and to appoint or to select the one of the network member actually implement the project. Then normally our project is up to $250,000 US, which is kind of medium-sized project. Then it taking 12 to 18 months for the implementation. And so including the request period, and we can complete and everything within 2 years. That's one of the advantage of our efficiency and compared with other mechanisms. Please, next, please. So we take a different type of requests, and we say, technology transfer, but, like a different aspect of technology transfer, they can request. The main popular one is decision-making tools or feasibility studies or technology identification prioritization of the, within a particular sectors. And also we have a different policy supports and also R&D and private sector engagement. Please, next please. So to sum up, basically CTCN is matchmaking facility between the countries who require technology transfer support and expertise and based in a different part of the world. Next, please. So among nearly 600 network members, and they have different type of expertise they have. So, naturally more technology-based organizations, it's like over 200. But also we have capacity building, knowledge management, policy areas, and even finance, and different type of organization having a different skills and to provide for us. Next, please. So basically, CTCN cannot work alone, and we have to make a collaboration between technology executive committee, that's one thing, but all the bilateral donors in Germany and other countries, and also multilateral donors and the private sectors. So we identify CTCN role is very kind of first preliminary stage of technical support, including the needs assessment of the country for particular technology areas, and doing the feasibility studies and the demonstration type of project. Also, we provide policies to enabling the technology transfer, and also we provide knowledge sharing and capacity building services as well. So based on this CTCN preliminary services, we kind of try to promote more scaling up and getting the funding and support from bilateral, multilateral donors and the private sector in the future. Next, please. But when talking about technology transfer, it's technology itself or equipment, it's one aspect. Especially for the developing countries, more different aspects is getting more important. Recently more business models, utilizing mobile phone, for instance, or sharing with others. So how things work, even the same technology, how things work differently in different countries. Also market designing, it's important. And also system operations, how, for instance, renewable energy cases, how, making sure to make a linkage with a grid connection, and also, like all the, nowadays, all the smart technology, how to integrate into it. So, those aspects, and we have to identify which aspect is most important for the countries. But also, enabling policies, and then generally how to make innovation locally, and to do that, it's kind of collaboration between government, research institutions, private sector. It's so-called innovation ecosystems. It's getting more important. Next, please. So we talk today about mobility, sustainable transport areas, and particularly e-mobility. Randy is going to be present. But when talking about sustainable transport, we have to think about different options, different elements. So going to the e-mobility, it's you need first of all good road quality, and otherwise only bumpy road, and you cannot utilize electric mobility. But even before that, it's kind of natural option. It's more kind of increasing fuel efficiency and using cleaner fuels, including the biofuels. But also, like in developing countries, they use a lot of second-hand cars. So it's make sure good waste management, but also, like making sure the quality of efficiencies, and also, like how the car itself is working properly. That's also a part of the effort we have to make. The second part, naturally, more transport management, and to reduce the amount of the car on the road, and the public transport is very important. And increasingly, some countries try to introduce the new public transport mode, like bus rapid transit, the even light railways, and so on and so forth. And also sharing mobility, it's quite, like Uber and the type of services, it's getting popular and even European countries. And utilizing all the mobile technologies, that's quite, like an interesting area of working. Then other option, it could be more advanced option, is e-mobility or hydrogen vehicles and so on and so forth. But to be able to do this one, it's like proper urban planning or intelligent management systems and proper regulations. Then in case of e-mobility, and if you don't use renewable energy in energy mix, then just you might increase the total emissions, and if electricity coming from coal and the traditional fuels. So this integration element is quite important. But also fueling and charging stations you have to create. That's quite an investment. And also local capacity, if they want to, like e-mobility case, it's much simpler than conventional vehicles in terms of mechanism. So it's under possibility to make it, part of the e-mobility could be created in the local capacity if they have. Next, please. So here, CTCN getting different requests for sustainable transport. And we are, like over 10 projects and working on transport areas. And either under implementation, it's completed, or we are getting the request. And this is the list of the requests coming from the Asia areas. And for the moment, it's ongoing e-mobility project is only one in Jakarta, Indonesia. They are willing to introduce the electric buses. So they're asking us to make an investment plan and a procurement document. So it's quite concrete support and to public sector to be able to procure the e-mobility in this way. And recently, I'm not leading this slide, and we are getting the request from the 3 different African countries on like general kind of market research and also policy strategy and to introduce e-mobility and in those 3 countries, which is quite interesting new development. For other countries, more not going back, please. Yeah, thank you. So for other countries not specified in e-mobility, it's more general low emissions or sustainable transport. In this case, it's making roadmaps and strategy action plans, or like making the proposal to get global funds such as GCF. And recently more like Bhutan and Laos, and they have kind of more concrete idea about they wish to introduce intelligent transport systems, so they need a capacity building. In the Laos cases, they have excess electricity from the hydropower, and which they want to kind of convert into the hydrogen and the methane and to be utilized for the mobility, which is quite interesting new development. Next, please. This is from the Africa and the Latin America cases. And Ethiopia and Addis Ababa, they introduced the light railway transit already, but they want to expand, and to be able to do that, they need a financial strategy, which is, they asked us to develop this strategy as well. And Panama and Brazil cases, they kind of wish to, develop the hydrogen research, which is also quite new area of development. But it's in all kind of, their emerging economy, so it's on the hydrogen might be, it's not too ambitious to introduce and for those countries, but for other countries could be, a little bit too ambitious and not near future as well. Next, please. So we have to have a green recovery from COVID-19, and for the moment, CTCN try to focus on helping the country, in particularly those areas, to develop the national system of innovation, which I explained earlier. Also increasing interest on the circular economy, especially in Latin America, and now in Africa also interest is emerging. So we are supporting to develop national roadmaps and to integrate into the updating the national determined contribution, and they have to submit them by the end of this year. Also increasing interest on digital or industry 4.0 ideas, particularly integrating into the urban transportation or urban planning. And also we want to work for more adaptation areas and building the resilient community, but also introducing the nature-based solutions and for the coastal zone management and flood management and so on and so forth. Next, please. Okay, I try to speak and louder. So we are also, how to scale up, and which means, we try to obtain the, our linkage with, financial mechanism, particularly, and the Green Climate Fund. We submit over 20 readiness proposal and to implement, based on the DCF funding. And we are working also global environment facility. And recently we got the innovation aggregator project from the adaptation fund. We are working with the UNDP to provide $10 million US support and for the small adaptation projects. Also, we are closely working with NDC partnership, and we are supporting the 11 country requests from the NDC partnership and working for the developing the new NDCs coming later this year. Next, please. So this is the last final slides, and CTCN is based on nearly 600 network members, and we encourage the listeners also join our network to be able to exchange ideas, but also commercial opportunity to go into the bidding for to get our project as well. But also beyond our project itself, we have kind of matchmaking facility, and to get your kind of business and knowledge sharing opportunity or joint research opportunities and so on and so forth. This is a free of charge, and you can visit our website and how to apply for it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Orly and Tomoo. Julia, are there any questions from the audience already?
Yes, we have two questions. So the first one is to Tomoo. Does the CTCN help identify a country's need assessment, or does the host country request assistance for already thought through projects in mind? If so, how does the NDE apply for such needs assessment?
That's a very good question. Actually, we have kind of methodology called technology needs assessment. And already, we provide the support for quite many countries. And but also, still there are many countries and who don't have a needs assessment yet. So basically, countries can request to do this assessment. Then normally, we encourage country come up with their request based on this assessment. So it's like if your country doesn't have a needs assessment yet, and we encourage to contact us and to give the support for the conducting this assessment. Currently, we are conducting this assessment through the GCF readiness for the over 10 countries right now. But also another question I understand is how to get the request itself. It's like, if country can come up with a request themselves, it's very encouraging. But sometimes they kind of want to have a brainstorming and getting ideas. So we sometimes provide some capacity building and or so-called incubation opportunities. But also we can kind of later in this discussion also you can kind of ask the support from the Annex 1 countries, NDEs, and to be able to making some kind of brainstorming and getting support and to get interesting requests and coming to us. Thank you.
Great. So the second question is, how does CSO engagement take place in this process?
Yes, and we have also CSO NGO is a part of our members, but also we have the representative of the environmental NGO in the advisory board. But also NGO might have a kind of good source of knowledge which we are sharing on our knowledge platforms, and also we have also kind of capacity building, knowledge transfer type of project as well, and that's where NGOs and can be quite engaged. And also we have also project engaging especially women and young people and to be able to skill up to the entrepreneurship. That's where we try to make effort and to engage local NGOs in the project, and asking also network members to make a partnership with local partners and to implement those projects. So different way of engaging the civil society in this way.
Thank you very much. Julia, I guess those were the two questions for now.
Yes, we have one more, or do you want to move on?
We can, yeah, or we can move on and then address maybe the last question in the panel discussion afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'm happy to move on to the next presentation, to the second presentation of today. The second presentation is from Randy Zadra. Just give me a moment. Okay. Randy is the North American board member of the World Manufacturing Forum, WMF, and an advisor to several companies, including PEM Motion. He has worked in senior executive capacities with Bell Canada Enterprises, Teleglobe, DataWind, as well as the National Research Council of Canada in Montreal, Boston, and Washington, D.C. He also worked at the MIT Media Lab in Boston, serving as project director for the Entrepreneurship and Development Program. Randy, I would hand over to you. Just give me a second to pull up your slides.
Sure.
If you want to get started with maybe some introductory words, feel
Sure.
free.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. A pleasure to take a few minutes to discuss e-mobility with you. My goal today is really to show you some ideas and to stimulate some questions and maybe to stimulate some interest in your respective countries about implementing e-mobility solutions. I have three sub-objectives. One is I'm going to show you how it can be fairly economic in your countries to develop solutions locally, how they can be also developed as a refurbishing solution. I'll give you some examples of those types of projects. And thirdly, I want to show you how e-mobility can really be an economic development opportunity for your countries, creating jobs locally, good jobs, and developing solutions for the environment at the same time. Okay, so next.
I'm sorry.
So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story here about a number of different projects. The first story I'm going to tell you is about Street Scooter, which was the first electric vehicle for the Deutsche Bundespost in Germany. As you can see here, it's a small truck which was developed in record time and now is active on the streets of Germany to support the Deutsche Bundespost. I'm going to go fairly quickly through these slides, and then if there's questions later on, feel free to ask them. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the beautiful thing about electric vehicles is that they can be produced locally, and they can be produced more quickly than other types of vehicles because they're simpler to produce. You don't have traditional combustion engines, less parts, and therefore the speed to market can be a lot faster. Next. So what was learned through the street scooter approach to building electric vehicles applies not only to trucks and traditional vehicles, which we hear about, but also to more appropriate technology, which could apply in developing countries, such as tuk-tuks, tricycles, and other types of vehicles to solve urban mobility problems, and I'll talk about that shortly. Next. So we have developed a methodology, an approach, which is called the high return on engineering, which allows this kind of local production to happen. And that's a very important element to allow countries around the world to really take ownership of this sector instead of just importing everything. You know, how can these things be developed locally is really the question that this methodology addresses. Next. Okay, let's skip that one. I just mentioned that. So PEM Motion, we've been doing this kind of work for a number of years, and we work in a number of different areas, as I said, everything from shuttles to e-bicycles to agricultural vehicles. So a wide diversity of e-mobility solutions that you can think about in your ecosystem. Next. Yeah, next. So the way to think about e-mobility as you're thinking about implementing local projects in your countries is in terms of, you know, a full cycle type of approach where you can take a look at the specific opportunity, understand the engineering associated behind it, and then develop a product planning and training and support kind of infrastructure around it. You do not have to import these vehicles from other countries necessarily. There is a way to produce them locally, efficiently, and you know, creating, as I said earlier, an economic development opportunity for the countries. Next. Yeah, so let's skip that one. I think I've addressed it already. Yeah, so we've been doing work in a number of countries around the world. I'm actually located in Canada, in North America, and we have activities in various countries, including in Mexico, and we're looking at some interesting projects in Costa Rica and in India, which I'll talk about shortly. Next. So one of the things that we've done is developed training academies to support this kind of local industrial development for e-mobility, which is, these are jobs for the future. So it's important that, that you take ownership of the local requirements, build the capacity, work with the universities to create innovative solutions so that you can develop appropriate local solutions, and I'll show you some of these shortly. Next. So this is just another example or series of examples of projects that that we have been involved in, and I'll go through some of these maybe very quickly, one by one. Next. So this is called Ooze Mobility, for example. So Ooze works on the basis of a multi-use delivery service so that people don't have to own their own trucks and utilize kind of like an Uber type of service for the logistics industry. So you can see that this is a very efficient way to do it. The cost of delivery becomes very low that way. And I should mention that all of these projects, while we certainly, the goal is to meet, you know, the goals of carbon reduction, they also become very cost efficient in terms of, you know, owning and cost of service for the vehicles. Next. So, okay, so these are bicycles which charge themselves, for example. automatically when you plug them into, when you dock them into a station. That's an example of a different type of e-mobility project. Next. I think earlier hydrogen was mentioned. So hydrogen can be a solution also for, especially for fleet vehicles and for you know, larger companies. And a number of those projects are going on around the world, and we'd be happy to tell you more about those. Next. We're involved in India in a sector that is very critical. There's a number of projects to electrify tuk-tuks, and the approach here can be twofold, and this might apply in some of the countries that you're in. There are efforts to convert existing tuk-tuks into electric vehicles and also build brand new ones. So both options are possible. Next. So this is another example of Uganda. This is a retrofit example where bicycles are being retrofit to include battery operation. So this is yet another type of solution that could be considered for the right environment. Next. Okay, this is back to a kind of a developed country context. This is called Duck Train. It's an e-mobility solution which offers infrastructure as a service for logistics companies. And it's really a semi-automated lightweight trailer which can bring objects, deliver objects in different parts of the city. Next. So I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them either now or towards the end when we do it together as a group. Okay.
Thank you very much, Randy. Yeah, I mean, Randy just said it. Julia, are there any specific questions for Randy?
No.
No question. Okay. Then I would suggest we move on with the next agenda item, which is really getting into the panel discussion. So if I could ask all of you to just turn on your video again, so that we can start with the discussion. Just give me a moment. I have some technical difficulties here. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, thank you very much for all of your inputs. Very interesting, very good presentations. Maybe to get started with the discussion, I would like to know from you, maybe Randy. You just described at the end some examples from India, also from Africa, some projects that were implemented. Can you maybe describe the ideal pathway for the spread of e-mobility in developing countries?
Yes, I think the first thing to look at is really demand, because it's fine for us to develop interesting technologies in the back room, in the labs, but if there's no demand, then it's not going to work. So the first issue is to understand demand. And if you look at many developing countries, demand is in that picture that I showed you of the tuk-tuks in India, right? That picture can be replicated in many other capital cities. That's a lot of smog. That's you know, polluting the air. That's a big opportunity because people want a cheaper solution, which it would be because you don't have to put petrol in it if you charge it with electricity. So I think the pathway is look at demand and then determine how you can localize production. It's not necessarily about importing, foreign technology. This is an area where local production can happen and is happening. The question is how to accelerate it. So there's many other examples which I haven't given where there's great projects, going on. But I think the challenge for the world is to accelerate this so that, we meet the carbon targets by really considering areas where there's lots of demand, and that areas that can be implemented in a relatively short time frame, as opposed to, creating a $1 billion, kind of urban transit solution, which will take forever to implement. So look at the demand and focus on the numbers that exist in many developing countries is really the key.
And maybe because you said, it's all about accelerating. So is there could you think of any concrete steps that we should take in order to accelerate those technology cooperations?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think there are many things that need to happen locally. One is, first of all, an understanding of what is possible, a scaling up of the local entrepreneurship system, support because there are a lot of entrepreneurs who will get involved in this sector if they're supported. So, the kinds of things that can happen is exactly the kind of support that the CTCN is providing. Tomoo listed a number of very good projects. Most of those projects are kind of looking at, feasibility and the like, but I would encourage moving quickly towards getting access to all the other climate-oriented initiatives, as Tomoo mentioned, so that the funding and financing, which is critical, can be provided to the very good ideas that people have. And so this is not about doubting the technology, it's really about execution and putting in place the right support structures. And I think there are many countries who are doing that very, very well right now and moving very quickly. And so we need to just keep accelerating that. Do you want me to answer some of these questions that have come up on the question? There's a bunch of questions. Maybe we can bundle some of these. I don't know.
We can. Yeah, I was just curious if maybe CTCN has an opinion on this as well. Yeah. So basically, to describe a little bit the vision, what we can all do. I mean, the technology mechanism, the CTCN, the NDEs of the industrialized as well as the developing countries. How can we work together in promoting the so critical and transformative change in the transport sector? And then we move on to some questions that are coming up from the audience.
I guess I can. Yeah. Okay, I can provide a couple comments, and then Tomoo as well, I'm sure, has some things to say about this. For me, the first thing that comes to mind when taking a macro level view at all the bodies that are out there, at all the organizations trying to do the work, including the UN, the CTCN, and so on, is really to find the synergies between all these organizations to really come together and understand what each other are doing. And to ensure that we are using each other's strengths and complementing each other, filling gaps. And that's what CTCN, is also talking to other partners to see how the CTCN can support other organizations and how those organizations can support CTCN. So I think that's been a really positive step, is to explore that area. And I think basically from the high level perspective, one of the critical things that has to happen really is to have everybody understanding what's out there, who's delivering what, and to come together in a more complementary fashion. But Tomoo, do you have anything?
No, already you mentioned clearly, but our difference is, we have 161 countries try to work together and to provide, support and each other, let's say. So we have so many different transport projects and done by different agencies and the NGOs. But really we wish to coordinate quite well, but also like between countries, and we kind of stimulate knowledge transfer and the experience from the country we already implemented sustainable transport, and then the lesson can be transferred into the different countries, and that's where we wish to stimulate and really through this mechanism.
Okay, great. I would, Julia, I would hand over to you to see if there are any questions. I mean, obviously there are some because Randy was already very keen to answer them. So maybe we could address one of the questions from the audience.
Yes, we do have a number of questions. So the first one is, what are the main challenges for transfer and adoption of such e-mobility technology in developing countries?
Yeah, I guess that's for me. I think I've kind of touched on that already, but I would really encourage, it's really not about the technology, it's about the knowledge as to how to implement the technology, because there's lots of it available worldwide and locally, and how to integrate that into local solutions that meet local needs. So that's a generic, high-level answer, but I really do think that's really the most important thing.
Maybe related to that, we had another question. As you mentioned, the main issue of e-mobility is not technology itself, but a spread network of charging stations. How did you address that in India or Uganda, for example?
Yeah, so, the beautiful thing about generating electricity in developing countries is that there are options available. Solar being a very, very good one. So there's plenty of examples in developing countries that entrepreneurs have started small solar stations, and they started by charging batteries for cell phones. So there's plenty of examples of those around the world, and now you have entrepreneurs who are setting up solar stations, for example, to charge bigger batteries for other types of solutions. So there are appropriate examples, because of course, we know that electricity can be lacking in many remote areas in developing countries still, but there are local solutions that can be designed in and around that. So creating docking stations with solar charging is a very, very good one as an example. There are others. Of course, if you have access to the grid, and in some countries, the electricity operators are very keen to get involved to do charging. So it really depends. I mean, we're talking about a big world. We were talking the other day about, the differences among countries and even within countries. So it's really about designing the appropriate solution for the local environment. But there are solutions. Again, it's not about the technology, it's about the creativity of implementing it properly.
Great. Julia, any
we do
other...
have other questions. Mm-hmm. So the other ones also go out to Randy. The first one is, Randy, have you worked with indigenous groups?
I've worked with indigenous groups personally in the past on creating, for example, in a different sector, solutions for schools and creating, getting internet access into remote areas, which had some of the very similar issues associated with it. My answer is indirectly, yes. I can't point to a specific example, but yeah, certainly, they're a key aspect of providing, I would say, connectivity and also transportation in many remote areas of countries around the world. So very important, let's say, group to work with.
And the last question that we have at the moment is, Randy, you suggested there is operating cost advantage to the business case in e-delivery. Do you have any detailed studies to support this model?
It's a very good question. The short answer is yes. And that's been made possible by the advances in technology over the last couple of years, both in terms of the reduction in cost of batteries and also the reduction in cost of building the delivery vehicles. So yes, we work extensively in that area. And we have a number of cases where we have, concrete, detailed numbers on that.
Great.
Both, I should say, both from a developed country perspective and a developing country perspective, because it can work in both scenarios. And really, this has only been made possible over the last few years because of some of the things I talked about. So we're really at an inflection point right now, which is very exciting, for the world. Instead of having to create a lot of subsidies for these technologies, they can prove themselves out operationally.
There's probably way more to discuss around this whole subject, but I'm looking a little bit at the time. If there's no further question, and I understood from Julia that at the moment there's no other question, I would suggest to come to an end here, and I would hand it over to Malte Bornkamm, who is from the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. He will give us some closing remarks on the whole webinar series that we've been hosting for the past 4 weeks. So welcome. I'm going to share my screen again. Welcome, Malte, and I just share the screen, and once the slides are up, just feel free to get started.
I fear that Malte is not with us at the moment. It seems that he dropped out of the session.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, he dropped out. Maybe we just give it a moment.
We do have one more comment from the audience if you would like me to give us a bit of time.
Sure,
So
great.
there's to Orly and Tomoo, there was a suggestion made. Probably if CTCN have structured description for each proposed technology, they can recommend to countries the best suitable for them.
Yeah, generally we do so-called feasibility studies and also selection of the technology. That's where we provide advice. And which technology is better or not, it really depends on national local context. And in case of e-mobility, also I don't think you introduce e-mobility for whole scale. And you could start from like a rickshaw or e-bus, and also like a delivery services and like postal services like land representatives. So really we kind of provide a hands-on advice and analysis on where the particular technology fits the best in particular context, and that's we have to really provide concrete and support in this way. Just introducing whatever renewable energy is great for the country, than like talking about particular technology in particular system implementations and what policies required, and the actual implementation of any technology is complex, and that you have to take into account different aspects such as policy and the finance, and that's where we try to support kind of full-scale support to the countries.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, hello. Malte Bornkamm speaking here. In an attempt to activate my microphone, I was throwing myself out of the meeting. I'm very sorry for that.
No problem. We got another interesting question coming in from the audience, so we filled the gap, and now the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone, and so my role is now to recapitulate the series of webinars that the NDE team has organized, and So the first webinar, we are looking at the industry perspective of climate technology. So we were discussing with representatives from the steel and cement industry. And the conclusion is that low to zero carbon technologies are there already, and they're economically viable in a certain framework. The change to these technologies need to happen globally. So it means not only in developed countries, of course, but like on the globe. So it's crucial to develop robust NDCs, technology benchmarks, and develop carbon markets in order to spread low carbon technologies. The second webinar was on the issue of financing. So I looked at the possible sources for technology cooperation, which on one hand could be emission trading or public and private financing. Also, regulators and pensions are driving environment, social, and governance standards, and will be increasingly determine what technologies will be financed. And we had invited by HSBC as a finance institution. Also, emission trading based on benchmark will promote market forces and private finance, since this will be give value to low carbon investments. But also institutions like UNFCCC and the tech may have a role in coordinating and driving what standards will be required to support the level playing field and to bring the needed change. The third webinar, which has been mentioned today already, we looked at the implementation of technology cooperation and looking at Africa as a possible case study. And the private sector is already engaged in climate technologies, but more support is needed, lower financing costs in order to make investments and cooperation viable. There's several initiatives by the Federal Ministry of Economics and Energy from Germany, such as the Africa Business Network and Energy Solutions Made in Germany, which support technology cooperation. We have also been discussing with the CTCN director, represented by Dr. Rose Beza, encouraging the cooperation with the NEDs in developing countries. The fourth webinar was on the issue of upscaling technology cooperation. And there we conclude that the sector today, I guess we can conclude that the sectoral transformation is required. Transport has been mentioned as the second largest emitter, where we need transformation into technologies like the electromobility and the implementation of this technology. Above all, we need cooperation between developing NDEs, the CTCN, and the private sector can also provide a critical contribution to the change. At this point, I'd like to thank all participants and especially also the NDE team and all everyone who took part in the debate and made presentations in the webinar series. And I think it was clear in the series that climate technologies are critical for the path to zero emissions and that there's no time to lose. The change needs to happen in parallel, both in developed and developing countries. And after the corona crisis, green recovery is also an opportunity for decoupling the economic growth from the rise of carbon emissions. The NE Germany is looking forward for the continued cooperation with the technology mechanism, the CTCN, developed and developing countries, NDEs, and the private sector in promoting green technologies. And of course, also my ministry is committed to go forward in this process. So thanks again to everyone who took part, and also great thanks to the NE team represented by Nancy today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Malte Bornkamp. Yeah, with those closing remarks from you, we come to an end of not only of today's session, but of the whole webinar series. Again, also from my side and from basically on behalf of all NDE Germany, thanks again to all of our panelists during the whole webinar series, but also today. Thanks again to everyone who listened in today and during the last 4 weeks. We hope it has been an interesting webinar series for you. We hope you enjoyed the discussions and that there were maybe some takeaways for everyone. So as mentioned in the very beginning of today's session, you can check out on our website the previous webinars. You can look into the recordings, or you can look in the presentations. We share all the material on our website. And yeah, with this, I really want to close this webinar series. Let's stay in touch through our social media channels on either Facebook or Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. And yeah, have a good day, everyone. Thank you very much.